Welcome to the Best Hopes podcast. My name is Adam Friller.
And I'm Seth Walker.
And if you've been listening to the previous episodes, you know that this is an entire podcast that is focused on hope and building hope and all of those kinds of things. And each one of these episodes, we're going to take a slightly different look at what hope is and what hope could mean. Today, we're going to talk about a really kind of nuanced sliver of hope, which I'm kind of excited about, actually. And one of the synonyms to the word hope is to await something. So before we really get into it, maybe Cecil, I'll ask you, as you think about why we're going to talk about awaiting in a hopeful way, why should people even care that this is the angle that we're going to talk about?
Well, I think people should care because everyone does it. Whether you stop and have a thoughtful podcast-worthy conversation about this specific nuanced sliver of hope, people use it and do it, and it's a part of how we navigate life. But I think part of why every single one of these episodes matters is because you and I both know that this kind of stuff leads to change. When we take moments to invest in a particular kind of hope and to do the action involved in that kind of hope, we know things change, and they change in the ways that we can kind of capture and be fulfilled by and be happy with.
Yeah, I think I really like that. All of this you kind of ended with, that we could be fulfilled in this way, and I think that really is something worthwhile. And I also really like this, that you said, like, well, we all do this. We all wait for something. We all await the arrival of something. And so as you were talking, I was thinking about like, what are some of the things that we hope for, that we kind of await, right? And I think of things like, it's interesting because a lot of the things that I was thinking of either are the beginning of something, like I await the beginning of something, or I await the end of something. Like I've been doing this thing and I'm just like anticipating the ending. And so some of the ideas that came to my mind were things like waiting for a new school year to begin, right? I know I have hope that it's going to be a certain way, or that maybe the people I want to be in my class end up being in my class, or that I get the teacher that I'm hoping to get. And so there's this like awaiting news. I know that this event inevitably is coming, but I'm hoping it's going to turn out in a particular way. Other kinds of things that I was thinking about is like the end of something. As some of you know, my daughter just graduated from high school, right? So for now 13 years, we've been awaiting the arrival of this particular moment. And whether we like it or not, it will come. And so I guess the question that I have for you is, these beginnings and these ends, they oftentimes come, again, whether we want them to or not. So how does hope then intersect with the things that we're awaiting?
I think that's a great question. Hopefully I have a great answer for you. But I would start by saying I love the inevitability built into I'm awaiting something. When you're saying, from the time that our daughter started school, for the years to come, you were awaiting high school graduation. You knew it would happen. You knew that's a point that you're working toward. And what that did that whole time was that aligned a lot of your actions. There's going to come a day when your GPA is going to really matter. There's going to come a day when college is probably looking at how well-rounded of a student you were. What activities did you participate in? How did you show growth, and how did you show leadership? And there's going to come a day when your choices and your actions and the work that you put in right now is going to be scrutinized and is going to actually be needed for you to be the kind of person who can go on to the next level and do whatever the next level is asking of you. And so it's like this simultaneous inevitability of a good thing, of a meaningful thing coming, making a huge difference in how you're living your life towards that thing, but also the preparation for that inevitable thing. It's like this catch-22 of, now I have to be ready for that. I have to be the kind of a person who can meet that moment and who can do something with that moment too when it comes. And so I think it really starts to take shape and starts to really hit us with how powerful this awaiting thing is when we start to hear what people say they're hoping for in their therapy sessions, what they're hoping for when they're at the bottom of depression, when they're facing family crisis, or they're dealing with grief, or they're dealing with substance abuse. When they say, I hope for such and such, and that really means I'm awaiting such and such, the thing that goes in the blank, I think, starts to send off fireworks when you say, I'm just waiting for happiness. I'm just awaiting the moment that I can feel as strong as I used to feel. And I think that really, you can see how much of a difference that can make to be able to form that kind of a sentence and have that kind of a thing in your life. You're building up to the graduation of happiness, to the I've become the kind of person that I was really needing to be. And so I simultaneously had to do all the things that get a person to that point, while also living my life in a way that says, I know it's coming. I know that it's gonna, that version of myself, that moment that I want, is going to be here. And so with all of those things being present, I think you have no choice but to be a little bit more satisfied with the life that you're living, as compared to if you were waiting nothing at all. If you were to say, this is my fate and I'm permanently stuck in this and stuck dealing with these feelings that I'm having right now that aren't too great.
Yeah, I think there's something really, really, I think there's several things actually that are really powerful in what you said, and I'm going to do my best to remember them and get to each one of them. But I think one of the things that really kind of stands out to me as we think about this awaiting, and you used the word like preparing for this day, right? It's kind of two components. One is there is a knowledge. It's not just, I think sometimes when we use the word hope, it's like this empty dream of like, I hope this thing happens. And when we talk about hope in this way, it isn't an empty dream. We know this thing is coming, in this case, graduation, or maybe I'm going to get a new job, or I think sometimes when people are, going to have a baby or whatever it is, it's like I'm anticipating, I'm awaiting the arrival of this thing. There's some inevitability. It's no longer this empty dream that's out there, but it's an assurance. And so what that then does, as you were talking, it made me realize that hope then turns from a noun of the thing I want to a verb, which is the things that I'm doing to make that arrival of that thing the way that I want. Yeah. And so you used the example of like, at some point a university is going to evaluate, did you take the right kind of classes? Well, it takes preparation. It takes forethought. It takes what kind of college experience do I want to have? Well, that influences which classes I take in high school. So I'm preparing now for the inevitable thing to turn out the way I want it to turn out. You talked about like, maybe they want to know like, how did you grow? So I take note of challenges and difficulties that I've had to overcome. And I think, what did I learn from that? How do I want to be better? And now those challenges aren't just hurdles. They're meaningful events that are contributing to me getting to where I want to be. You talked about like, what kind of leadership positions have you taken, right? And I think, again, that it takes forethought to say, I want to put myself purposefully in certain places. If I want a music degree, then I want to be in leadership in a chorus class or in an orchestra. I want to strive to be the first chair, or I want to, right? So now the work that I put in, it's not just to achieve a thing, right? It's not like, yeah, becoming first chair at a thing is an accomplishment in and of itself, but there's an added layer of meaning because now I'm using it as a preparation for the next stage of what I want in my life. So it's this really fascinating combination of it's inevitable, but I'm making the inevitable what I want it to be. And I think what that does is that it puts control as much as it can in my hands. Yeah. Instead of just saying, I hope I get into college, I now say, I have some control about what kind of college experience I'm going to have. And so this awaiting the inevitable isn't just haphazardly sitting around and waiting for the day to arrive. I'm doing things to manifest the hope that it's going to turn out in a particular way.
Yeah. I really like this definition of of hope that we've kind of tripped and fell into. You carved out for us. And I think you're totally right. I mean, it's amazing how much sense of control, as you put it, it does hand to you just by looking at it in this kind of a way. Because I think it really inherently changes your relationship to your circumstances, no matter what those circumstances are. If we're going to keep going with the graduation college track type of thing, every decision that you make that's in this realm, from whatever young age through to when you're a young adult, can be put into some respect towards that college achievement type of thing. If you want to go to Harvard, what you're doing in high school is affecting your relationship to making Harvard possible. And I think it's the same if you look at your behavior. The decisions you're making in math class one day in 9th grade kind of is somewhere in the it's a drop in the bucket of the relationship you have now with the potential Harvard graduate kind of version of yourself. And to speak more on that control that it gives you, if we were looking at this in someone's life who is, maybe they're in a really, really low position, they're very depressed, they feel like they lost their job, their relationships are crumbling, whatever it is that they're hopeful for the future, the thing that they're awaiting, the decisions they make, the things that they do, how they respond to this moment, no matter how difficult it is affecting the relationship they have to the possibility of that future self happening. And when that future self shows up, what it really means and what it looks like after having arrived. What I want to ask you, though, is, I mean, we work in very practical places, and as fascinating as just the thought experiment of what happens when you await something, how could a person turn this into an action, a thing that they could do? You say how much awaiting a thing, hoping for a thing can change. Well, what do I do with that? If I'm having a hard time, how do I use that?
Yeah, I think as you were talking, I was thinking kind of a similar thing of like, well, graduation is a really like concrete, tangible thing. And oftentimes when people come in and talk to us, they say things like, I just want to have peace, or I just want to have confidence. And I think sometimes as we talk about those kinds of things, it feels nebulous and it feels like amorphous, right? It's like, how do I get a grasp on what confidence is? How do I know when confidence has arrived? I'm very clear when graduation day is, but I'm not sure when confidence has arrived. And so I was kind of thinking the same thing, but in the end, I was thinking it doesn't matter if it's tangible or not. I think in some sense, you walk toward graduation because you think it's an inevitable destination.
Right. Yeah.
And so every action you take, every class that you sit in, oh, this is leading me toward graduation. Or if you choose not to, right? If you choose to skip class, I'm jeopardizing my potential to achieve graduation. And I think if we took that same mindset, if I want confidence, then I should be thinking, how is everything that I do either contributing to me arriving at this inevitable confidence, or is it detracting from this inevitable confidence? And so I think there's kind of a self-evaluation in each moment to say, is this helping me get to where I want to be or not? And I think that's one of the real powers of having a solution-focused conversation, that in essence, we're saying, let's paint confidence as clearly as possible, so that as you think about confidence, as you envision confidence, as you anticipate, await arriving at confidence, you are crystal clear on what it is, what it looks like, what it means. And that, if you have that clear of a vision, then when I take this first step, or when I go into a social situation, or when I'm sitting on the bus next to somebody, am I interacting with them in a way that's consistent or inconsistent with that very clear vision of confidence that I have? And I think it becomes a self-propelling experience I think this is why I really like the word await, and I'm going to make one distinction in just a second, but what I really like about it is that if I'm awaiting the arrival of confidence, it feels inevitable to me. the amount of doubt that I have that's going to arrive slowly diminishes because I'm anticipating that this is going to happen. And I'm just looking for, am I behaving consistently with when it shows up or not? And I think that distinction that I was going to make is that there's a difference between awaiting and waiting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think waiting is a passive thing, right? I'm just sitting around, I'm a couch potato, I'm just waiting for this thing. And it doesn't require any action, it doesn't require any initiative, it doesn't require any effort. And awaiting is something totally different than that. It is, like you used that word before, this preparation for, right? That requires a lot of forethought and a lot of effort. And just sitting on the couch, it's not going to produce this thing. And so I think that's a really important distinction, is we're not just saying, well, just believe that you're going to get confident one day and then it'll show up. Mm-hmm. We are definitely not saying that. We're saying put every energy and every effort and every intention into preparing for the day when you finally say, I can't believe it, but confidence has arrived. Yeah. And so I think making sure that awaiting is very clear on, I'm putting every ounce of energy into what I intend to occur.
I keep trying to digest things in concise ways because I think it's difficult to not have a 6-hour conversation about this. But I think we are constantly seeing proof, evidence of how powerful this concept is and this frame of looking at things is. I mean, it's anecdotally observable and statistically observable that people who, if we're going to stick with this college thing, people who grow up in households where their parents are college graduates are extremely likely to be college graduates. And it's pretty much a given they will graduate high school, that it would just happen, seemingly. And the opposite, I suppose, is true too. If you are in a household, you grew up in a household where your parents didn't go to college, didn't graduate high school, it's pretty likely that, more likely than the other kids, that might be your fate too. And I don't think that's by accident. I think that's because there's this built-in sense of what you're awaiting. The kids whose parents have master's degrees and doctoral degrees are awaiting that. They're constantly having conversations like, how do we prepare for college? Let's talk about what you're en route to. And I imagine the conversations that the kids in the other homes, the less educated homes, are having different kinds of conversations. They're preparing for different things or having maybe less preparation in general for what the future could potentially hold. And I think that really makes a difference. And that's why when people come to our offices and we say, well, let's talk about if you are on the path toward happiness, toward confidence, towards peace, toward becoming exactly the version of yourself you want to become. If we're in preparation of that version of you, let's talk about the details of those things. And that's a very, very different line to walk than, like you said, something much more passive than to say, I don't think that's a possibility at all, or I have no clue what's coming next and I haven't thought about it and I don't want to think about it. I'm going to sit and wait for life to just kind of pop up at me each step of the way.
Yeah, I think the other kind of analogy that came to my mind as I was thinking about this is preparing for a trip or a vacation or whatever, right? There's so many details that you could attend to or you could choose not to attend to. And I don't know if I should say this or not, but my wife and I prepare for a trip in totally different ways. She is like a meticulous planner. She knows every restaurant that's in the area and which ones we should go to and which ones have the most positive reviews and all those kinds of things. But she also has like anticipated every possible event, right? If we're going to go to the beach, then we may need these kinds of things. If we're going to be hiking in the mountains, we may need these kinds of things. And she is a planner in minute detail for very specific things and has an extensive packing list. And I used to give her a really hard time around like, just put some stuff in your suitcase and let's go. Like, who cares if like... But one of the things that I have realized is that planning, that level of detail and care to creating and being prepared for any possibility that could occur, then when we actually get on the trip, it allows us to be more spontaneous, to be in the moment of that experience, to simply enjoy it. Because she has made all the preparations for anything that could occur, that then it allows us in that moment to sit in comfort and simply enjoy. I think if she took my tactic, then there might be moments where we, need to run to the grocery store because we didn't have sunblock, or we need to, and it takes away the time or the enjoyment of the event, because now we need to go do what we should have done before we left. And I think that's the other thing, if we think about it, again, kind of connecting it back to hopefulness, is that we hope when these significant moments arrive to be able to bask in the arrival and just be and enjoy and appreciate and say, this is what I was hoping for. But if we didn't put in the preparation, if we didn't put in the work, if we didn't put in the effort, we could inadvertently take away from our own enjoyment that moment of success.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's not even just, sitting and waiting, like you were saying, until this enjoyable moment comes, but it's like if I prepare now, if I put the work in now, if I align my future self for this thing, when I get there, it'll be even that much more enjoyable. I won't have to worry about the moment being subtracted or minimized by whatever my actions or lack of actions were before. And the last thing that I'll add, that I think kind of seems kind of obvious, but also is very valuable and worth saying, is that in this conversation about anticipation, about awaiting something, I think what you're awaiting matters a whole lot too. We talk so much about graduating, and I know that's not the future that everyone is awaiting. An enjoyable trip to the beach or to the mountains is a beautiful thing to be awaiting and preparing for. But I know that sometimes people find themselves awaiting other kinds of fates. They're awaiting maybe a life that's very different than graduating. That's, how long till I get in some serious trouble with the law, or where I get into a big fight with my family and now I got to go move out and figure something out on my own. Or, I'm awaiting, something dreadful. I'm awaiting sickness. I'm awaiting that my health is going to take a turn for the worse. And now I'm living my life according to that's what I'm awaiting. And I think the power of this starts to flip itself in the opposite direction when you place something in that spot that you're awaiting that doesn't serve you as well as something else might in that spot. And we talk so much about the path to peace and confidence and happiness and all these kinds of really satisfying things. But when you put something else at the end of your roadmap, even if it's a thing you're trying to avoid or saying you really don't like, I think that also still has the potential to change things, to change your life and how you're living and what you make of what your situation is. And I think, as always, it's regardless of what actually is the reality of your circumstances.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And I think it's valuable for us to think about not everyone could easily put something happy at the end of that journey. And I think you do hear about people who live in difficult situations of domestic violence or those kinds of things, and they await the next time, right? And it takes on that same level of hypervigilance and preparation, and they know they're listening for certain things. And so I think one of the gifts of this kind of hope is that a simple beginning is to say, if you weren't awaiting that, what would you rather be awaiting?
Right.
What would you rather be moving toward? And again, I don't want to minimize how difficult it might be to kind of shift that focus, but the skill of dealing with something difficult and the characteristics and the level of attunement that you've developed in that area could serve you actually quite well if you're anticipating something else. You could catch details that the other people who haven't had to experience those kinds of things would overlook, or you would have an understanding that I need to prepare in this particular way that somebody who hasn't had that experience might be completely oblivious to. And so I do think it is such a valuable thing to be able to say, what do I want? What do I want the end? And again, I think this captures that hope. Like, what do I hope the end of my journey is? And then begin to make preparations that move you in that kind of a direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, beautiful. Thank you, as always, for making these conversations so rich. I always get so much out of these conversations. I hope that people who listen to this get as much as I get out of it, because every time we have a direction of where we think this is going to go, and it always turns out better than I was anticipating. So thank you for making these conversations so useful.
I mean, I was thinking like, I would listen to this podcast, which I guess is the hope. We're making it.
Right. All right. Well, in the meantime, please like and share this if you know of people who could benefit from hearing about hope in the form of awaiting. Please feel free to share with them and help them to begin await something meaningful.